My golden child brother convinced our parents I was addicted to gambling to steal my inheritance. At his housewarming party, I revealed how he really afforded his dream home and everyone was shocked. My name is Alex, and I'm 32 years old. This story is about my younger brother Jake, who spent his entire life being the family favorite, and how his entitlement and greed ultimately exposed him as the fraud he always was. What happened 6 months ago still feels surreal, but every word of this story is absolutely true. Jake is 3 years younger than me, and from the moment he was born, he could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. While I was expected to earn good grades, help with household chores, and follow strict rules about curfews and responsibilities, Jake seemed to operate under a completely different set of expectations. When he brought home mediocre report cards, our parents celebrated his effort. When I brought home excellent grades, they reminded me that academic success was just expected, not praiseworthy. This double standard continued throughout our childhood and adolescence. Jake played sports, so our parents attended every game and practice, rearranging their schedules and spending thousands of dollars on equipment and travel expenses. I participated in academic competitions and science fairs, but our parents rarely attended my events, claiming they were too busy with work or Jake's activities. The favoritism was so obvious that extended family members would comment on it during holiday gatherings. Our grandmother would pull me aside and tell me how proud she was of my accomplishments, often adding that she wished my parents would recognize my achievements the way they celebrated Jake's. Our aunt would make pointed comments about how different my parents' reactions were when Jake succeeded versus when I did. Despite this preferential treatment, Jake and I maintained a decent relationship throughout our teenage years. I convinced myself that the favoritism wasn't his fault and that he probably didn't even notice how differently we were treated. I focused on my studies, worked part-time jobs to save money for college, and tried not to let the inequality affect my relationship with my family. The dynamic shifted dramatically when we reached adulthood. I graduated from college with honors, landed a good job in engineering, and began building a stable, independent life. Jake struggled through college, changing majors 3 times before finally graduating with a degree he never used. After graduation, he moved back in with our parents and spent 2 years working part-time jobs while supposedly figuring out his career path. During this period, our parents continued to financially support Jake while expecting me to be completely self-sufficient. They paid his car insurance, gave him spending money, and covered his student loan payments while I worked overtime to pay off my own debts. When I mentioned the unfairness of this arrangement, they explained that Jake needed more support because he was still finding his way, while I had always been independent and capable. The inequality became even more pronounced when Jake finally moved out of our parents' house. They helped him with his security deposit, co-signed his lease, and furnished his entire apartment. When I had moved out years earlier, I had done so with a borrowed truck, second-hand furniture, and no financial assistance from our family. What bothered me most wasn't the money itself, but the message it sent about our respective worth in our parents' eyes. Jake's needs were always prioritized, his failures were excused, and his modest successes were celebrated as major achievements. Meanwhile, my accomplishments were taken for granted, my challenges were ignored, and my requests for support were met with reminders about being responsible and independent. 3 years ago, our grandfather passed away and left a substantial inheritance to be divided among his children and grandchildren. My grandfather had been a successful small business owner who lived modestly but saved diligently throughout his life. The inheritance he left was enough to change someone's life significantly, providing a down payment for a house, funding for starting a business, or simply financial security for the future. According to the will, Jake and I were each supposed to receive equal portions of the inheritance, to be distributed through our parents as the executors of the estate. Our parents explained that they would hold our portions until we demonstrated readiness to handle such a significant sum responsibly. They said this was our grandfather's wish, though I later discovered that the actual will contain no such provision. For me, being deemed ready meant providing detailed financial plans, demonstrating stable employment, and proving that I had specific, responsible uses for the money. I submitted budgets, met with financial advisors, and presented comprehensive proposals for how I would invest and use my inheritance. Despite meeting every requirement they established, our parents continued to delay the distribution, claiming they needed more time to evaluate my readiness. Jake, meanwhile, made no such efforts to demonstrate financial responsibility. He continued working part-time jobs, lived paycheck to paycheck, and showed no interest in financial planning or investment strategies. Yet our parents never asked him to prove his readiness or submit any documentation about his plans for the inheritance. 2 years passed with no movement on the inheritance distribution. I continued to meet with our parents regularly, providing updated financial information and growing increasingly frustrated with their stalling tactics. They would claim to be reviewing my materials, consulting with lawyers, or waiting for the right time to make the distribution, but their excuses became increasingly transparent and ridiculous. During this period, Jake's lifestyle began to change in ways that didn't match his employment status. He started eating at expensive restaurants, taking weekend trips, and purchasing items that seemed well beyond his means as a part-time retail worker. When I asked him about his improved financial situation, he claimed he had gotten lucky with some investments and was managing his money better than before. Last year, Jake announced that he was buying a house. Not just any house, but a beautiful 4-bedroom home in an upscale neighborhood with a price tag that would require a substantial down payment and strong credit history. Given his employment situation and financial history, this purchase seemed impossible unless he had received outside help. When I asked our parents how Jake was affording such an expensive house, they explained that he had demonstrated remarkable financial growth and had convinced them he was ready to receive his inheritance early. They said they had been impressed by his maturity and his specific plans for using the money responsibly. I was stunned by this revelation. Jake had never shown any interest in financial planning, had never submitted the documentation our parents had required from me, and had never demonstrated the stability they claimed to be looking for. Yet somehow, he had convinced them to release his inheritance while mine remained tied up in their arbitrary approval process. When I confronted Jake directly about receiving his inheritance, he admitted that he had gotten his portion but claimed it was because he had a specific, time-sensitive opportunity to invest in real estate. He said our parents had recognized the wisdom of his plan and had decided to trust him with the money. He suggested that maybe I needed to be more creative in my approach and find a specific investment opportunity that would convince our parents to release my inheritance. The unfairness of the situation was staggering, but what made it worse was Jake's attitude about the whole thing. He acted as if his early access to the inheritance was a natural result of his superior planning and maturity, rather than the continuation of a lifelong pattern of preferential treatment. He showed no awareness of the double standard our parents had applied or any sympathy for my frustration with their decision. 6 months ago, Jake invited the entire extended family to a housewarming party for his new home. He had spent months renovating and decorating the property, clearly sparing no expense in creating his dream living space. The invitation described the party as a celebration of his success and independence, and our parents were clearly proud to show off their son's achievement to the rest of the family. I almost didn't attend the party, knowing how frustrating it would be to celebrate Jake's success while my own inheritance remained inaccessible. But something made me curious about how he had really managed to afford such an expensive house and extensive renovations. His part-time job and his inheritance, while substantial, didn't seem sufficient to cover the costs of what he had accomplished. The week before the party, I decided to do some investigating into Jake's financial situation. As an engineer, I had developed strong research and analytical skills, and I was determined to understand how my brother had managed such a dramatic financial transformation. What I discovered was far more shocking than anything I had expected. Through public records searches, I learned that Jake's house purchase had involved much more than just his inheritance money. The down payment had been substantial, but the mortgage was even larger than I had calculated. More importantly, I discovered that our parents had co-signed the mortgage, making them legally responsible for the loan if Jake defaulted on payments. This revelation led me to dig deeper into the financial arrangements surrounding Jake's house purchase. I discovered that our parents had not only released Jake's inheritance early, but had also provided additional funds from their own savings to help with the down payment and renovations. The total amount they had contributed to Jake's house was nearly double what either of us was supposed to inherit from our grandfather. But the most shocking discovery came when I found records showing that our parents had taken out a home equity loan against their own house to fund Jake's real estate purchase. They had put their own financial security at risk to give Jake his dream home, while continuing to delay my inheritance distribution with claims about fiscal responsibility and careful evaluation. Armed with this information, I realized that Jake's housewarming party would be the perfect opportunity to address the financial favoritism that had defined our family dynamics for decades. Our entire extended family would be there, including relatives who had witnessed the preferential treatment throughout our lives. It would be impossible for our parents to deny or minimize their actions with so many witnesses present. I spent days preparing for the conversation I planned to have at the party. I printed copies of public records, loan documents, and property records that documented the true scope of our parents' financial support for Jake's house purchase. I wanted to present facts rather than emotions, making it impossible for anyone to dismiss my concerns as sibling jealousy or misunderstanding. The housewarming party was everything Jake had hoped it would be. The house looked stunning, with professional quality renovations and expensive furnishings throughout. Our extended family was clearly impressed by what Jake had accomplished, and our parents glowed with pride as they gave tours and explained the various improvements he had made to the property. During dinner, our father gave a toast praising Jake's hard work and financial responsibility. He talked about how proud they were to see Jake achieve his goals and create such a beautiful home for himself. He mentioned that Jake's success was a testament to the values they had tried to instill in both of their children and that they hoped his example would inspire others in the family. The irony of this toast was overwhelming. Our father was praising Jake's financial responsibility while standing in a house that had been purchased primarily with our parents' money and secured with loans that put their own financial future at risk. He was holding up Jake as an example of independence while describing someone who was completely dependent on family financial support. When the toast ended and everyone was expressing their admiration for Jake's achievements, I stood up and asked if I could add some perspective to the celebration. I thanked Jake for hosting such a beautiful party and acknowledged that he had created a truly impressive home. Then I mentioned that I thought our extended family would be interested to know the full story of how such a remarkable transformation had been accomplished. I began by sharing some details about our grandfather's inheritance and the different standards our parents had applied to Jake and me regarding the distribution of those funds. I explained that while I had been required to submit detailed financial plans and wait for approval that never came, Jake had received his inheritance immediately when he found a house he wanted to purchase. The room grew quiet as I continued, but I could see that many family members were not surprised by this information. They had witnessed the preferential treatment throughout our lives and understood the pattern I was describing. What surprised them were the additional details I revealed about the true scope of our parents' financial support for Jake's house purchase. I shared the public records I had discovered, showing that our parents had not only given Jake his inheritance early but had also contributed additional funds from their own savings. I explained that they had co-signed his mortgage, making themselves legally responsible for his loan payments, and had taken out a home equity loan against their own house to fund his down payment and renovations. The documentation I presented showed that the total amount our parents had contributed to Jake's house was nearly 3 times what either of us was supposed to inherit from our grandfather. They had essentially given Jake both of our inheritances plus a significant portion of their own savings and retirement security to fund his real estate purchase. Jake's face went white as I laid out these facts, and our parents looked horrified that their financial arrangements were being exposed to the entire family. Several relatives asked questions about the numbers I was presenting, and I was able to provide specific documentation for every claim I made. But I wasn't finished. I explained that while our parents had been lecturing me about financial responsibility and the need to prove my readiness for my inheritance, they had been secretly funding Jake's lifestyle and covering his expenses for years. I shared examples of the different standards they had applied to us throughout our adult lives, always expecting independence from me while providing unlimited support to Jake. I concluded by pointing out that Jake's success wasn't really his own achievement, but rather the result of extraordinary family financial support that had been hidden from everyone, including me. I said that while I was happy Jake had a beautiful home, I thought our family deserved to know the truth about how it had been acquired and what it had cost our parents to make it possible. The silence that followed my presentation was deafening. Jake couldn't deny any of the facts I had presented because they were all documented in public records. Our parents couldn't claim the information was false because I had copies of the actual loan documents and property records. Several family members began asking our parents direct questions about their financial decisions and the fairness of their treatment of Jake and me. Our aunt asked why they had put their own retirement security at risk for one child while denying the other child access to his rightful inheritance. Our uncle asked whether they had considered the message they were sending about financial responsibility and family equity. Jake tried to defend himself by claiming that he had earned the family's support through his hard work and good intentions. But when relatives asked about his employment history and financial contributions to the house purchase, it became clear that his role had been minimal. He had essentially been the recipient of an enormous family gift while I had been denied access to much smaller inheritance that was rightfully mine. Our parents attempted to justify their decisions by claiming that Jake had needed more support and that they had always planned to help both of us equally. But when family members asked why my inheritance was still being withheld and why they had never offered me similar support for a house purchase, they had no reasonable explanation. The party ended early, with most relatives leaving uncomfortable with what they had learned about our family's financial dynamics. Several family members approached me privately to express their shock at the extent of the favoritism and to apologize for not recognizing how unfairly I had been treated over the years. In the weeks that followed, the extended family pressure on our parents was immense. Relatives who had witnessed the revelation at Jake's party began asking pointed questions about the inheritance situation and expressing their disapproval of the preferential treatment. Our grandmother, in particular, was horrified to learn that her late husband's wishes had been disregarded in favor of continued favoritism. 3 weeks after the housewarming party, our parents finally released my inheritance, along with interest and an additional amount to compensate for the delay and the inequality in their treatment. They admitted that they had made mistakes in their handling of the estate and acknowledged that their favoritism had been unfair and harmful to our family relationships. Jake's relationship with our parents became strained as they realized the extent to which their financial support had enabled his lifestyle rather than encouraging genuine independence. They began requiring him to take more responsibility for his mortgage payments and household expenses, leading to conflicts as he struggled to maintain his standard of living without their unlimited support. More importantly, Jake's standing within our extended family was permanently damaged. Relatives who had previously admired his apparent success now understood that his achievements were largely the result of family financial support rather than personal accomplishment. The respect and admiration he had enjoyed was replaced by skepticism about his actual capabilities and character. As for me, finally receiving my inheritance allowed me to purchase my own home and begin building the financial security I had been working toward for years. But more satisfying than the money was the validation that came from having the truth about our family dynamics finally acknowledged and addressed. The housewarming party revelation had forced our parents to confront the consequences of their preferential treatment and had exposed Jake's dependence on family support to everyone who mattered. Sometimes the most effective revenge isn't elaborate planning or dramatic confrontation, but simply presenting the truth and allowing people to draw their own conclusions about fairness and character. Jake still lives in his beautiful house, but the pride and satisfaction he once felt about his achievement has been replaced by the knowledge